Supernova with me, Amy Canavan, a State of Mind's dedicated football chat show. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Shelley Kerr. Shelley, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. How's lockdown treated you?
Yeah, it's been tough. I think, like everyone, you obviously now we're get a wee bit more less restrictions in place, so that's been good. But I think it's been a tough year for everyone. I think the good thing is that, my sport, football, as everyone knows, it unites people, and I've been really fortunate to get out and watch a few games and do a bit in, media work as well. So it's been great seeing live football, and I'm glad that some of the restrictions have been lifted. I think it's great for the country because it's been a tough time for everyone, and everyone's got their own story to tell throughout the pandemic. So hopefully, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, and you've touched upon there, obviously you have had a little bit more increase in media work, and we'll get to that. But let's go right back to the very beginning. Growing up, is there a space for young Shelley to be able to dream of being a footballer as a young girl, or is the barriers there from the get-go?
I think now there is. Certainly when I was growing up it was entirely different, and thankfully things have changed. I grew up in my 50s, early on in my 50s I may add, but when I was growing up there wasn't a lot of girls that played football, and if you did, there was a stigma attached to it, and there wasn't, a kind of formal infrastructure in place. So I had to play with boys, which was great. I really enjoyed it. It probably helped me develop, that kind of, your characteristics early, resilience, because there was always another hurdle in your way. So you had to compete from an early age, and I was the youngest in a family of 4. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister. So, you were always fighting for things from an early age, and, it was brilliant. I grew up in a local community, a little place called Polbeth, and it was fantastic, and my parents still live there yet, and it's something I'm really proud of. And even although I eventually went on to be professional in football, first as a player and then as a coach, but I go back, and community sport is everything, because that's where you fall in love with the game. And it's fantastic that now there is, going from community, you play at school, then you've got pathways in place for whatever sport you play, and I think that's really important for young kids.
Are you allowed to play like in the boys' clubs when you were young?
No, that was the hard part. I played at primary school, so my art teacher spotted me playing in the playground with the boys, and he invited me along for a trial. So I played for Parkhead Primary. I was the first girl to do that. But when I moved to secondary school, I wasn't allowed to play. And I remember, my local club, Polbeth United, the boys team, and then East Calder Colts, they wanted to sign me, but I wasn't allowed to play. So the rules at that time didn't allow girls to play in boys football. So it was tough, apart from obviously at my school. So I found myself, as a 12, 13-year-old, I could have been lost to the game, but because of my resilience and will to play football and desire to play football, my mum and dad, sought out a team, a women's team, and there probably only was about 20 women's teams at the time. So I was 13 and then had to play senior women's football. So it was a tough grounding for me, but and the most local team to me was a team called Edinburgh Dynamo. So every week my mum would walk me to the train station at West Calder. I would get the train to Edinburgh Waverley, and then run from the Waverley to Meadowbank to train with this team. And for about 2 years I never played because I was so small, and you were playing against women twice your age. But I stuck with it, and eventually, just as you develop and started to grow and mature, then I eventually got more playing time, and it was just fantastic. Team sport is brilliant. First and foremost, you like the sport, but the friends that you make, and then obviously playing a sport that you love, it was just fantastic.
Were there many youngsters, like 13, 14-year-olds in the women's teams at that time?
There was a few, but not a lot at all. And as I say, it's my previous role, both as kind of head coach of the national team, and obviously girls and women's performance, being part of that to drive the programmes forward. It's looking back and reflecting, it's it's brilliant to see how far, you know, women's football has came on in the last, you know, 20, 30 years.
Was the resilience always there? There has to be times that you think, well, this isn't, the past's not going to be there. Were there times that you wanted to maybe pack it in?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, you know, like even, you know, Christmas time, I would always ask for a football, you know, and it wasn't just that, you know, it was a proper, what the, you know, the Premier League players were playing with at that time. That was all I wanted for Christmas, or the newest, latest football strip. And I always had a tracksuit on. And, you know, back then, you would get called or labelled a tomboy. You know, that's not the case now. And, you know, and rightly so. But, yeah, I think that I've always had, you know, something within me and inside me that's had that grit and determination to say, you know, we can play football. I can play football, you know, just as good as the boys. And, you know, I want to play football. You should be allowed to do something that you want to do, that you're passionate about. And, you know, if throughout my years being involved in football, if you've played a little part in, you know, making sure that young girls can have, you know, better opportunities, then that's, you know, I feel really, really happy about that. But yeah, I mean, myself, my own career, it's you could easily have said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to travel into Edinburgh. I'm just going to stop and I'm going to play another sport. And I did play other sports, but, you know, nothing could ever compare to football for me. And, you know, I had a spell out the game when I had my daughter and then came back. But there's been so many, you know, challenges that certainly through my whole career, both personally and professionally, but I think that makes you the person that you are.
Just as you've touched on it there, how did you come back from that 8-9 year, that spell out like that? It's not just a little year on the side, it's nearly a lifetime, that's a long time to be out of the game. What brought you back to it?
It was by chance. I mean, I still, you know, had an invested interest in football. I'd watch, you know, I'm the same, yeah, I watch every game of football. It doesn't matter whether it's women's football, youth football, men's football. I watch everything, you know, from globally. It can be Spain, Scotland, wherever, I'll watch football. But no, I think I was in full-time employment. I was full-time mum. I was trying to juggle everything, and it just, you know, I felt that priorities were more for my family at that time. But I got asked to play at a charity game with my work at the time, and I went away, played the game, and then after that, the guys at my work asked me if I would play five-a-sides, and on a Friday, we finished early on a Friday at the time, so I did, and I just really got the bug back for playing, and just the hunger and desire to go back and play. And, you know, I wasn't fit, so I phoned my old manager, the previous team that I had played at, and I said, look, I'm thinking about coming back. And she said, come along to training. So I did, and I went along to train the first few weeks, and, you know, I've got to be honest, I was blown, really unfit, out of condition, and it's like everything in my life, you know, I put everything into it. You either don't do it or you put everything into it. So I decided, you know, I'm going to spend a season, try and get myself fit and do it properly, and I did. And, you know, about a season and a half later, I was doing quite well, and then I got a call up back into the national team. So I got my first cap in 1989 and my second one in 2001 when I came back. So it was incredible. And, you know, I think it's a message, a strong message to, you know, young girls that, you know, age and stage development, it can change, and, you know, not to get frustrated and to stick with it, and, you know, have a mindset that you can succeed if you put the hard work and effort in. And, you know, I never look back after that. The hard work did pay off, and yeah, it was great. I mean, I went on to represent Scotland 59 times, and I was captain and a lot of occasions as well, and it's something that, you know, those times, your playing days are the best days ever. I thoroughly enjoyed representing my country. It's just a dream come true.
I just want to hop back to the pre the gap. When so you're at Edinburgh Dynamo and you're still relatively young. When did all the coaching sort of come in? Because that came in at a very young age as well, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I had a passion when I played. I started off, when I was younger, I played as a striker, then I moved back, played right back, played centre back, and I always felt my best qualities as a player was my game intelligence and game awareness and reading the game. And I always felt that playing as a centre back, if you could coach players in front of you, then it made your day or your 90 minutes a wee bit easier. And that was always my training thought, but I was very much a team player. I wanted to help everyone, and I was a deep thinker about the game. You know, I didn't just go to training, and I wanted to know why I was doing everything, and I wanted to understand the game tactically. So I decided to do, I think it was a C licence then, and I done that in 1989. I completed that in 1989, and then I went and coached the local boys team as Polbeth United under 11s. And I felt that was the right thing to do, because I always had one eye on, when I finished playing, that I would go into coaching and give something back to the game. And so it was a conscious effort on my part early to look at the coach education pathway. And I didn't just want to work, you know, and go right in at the top with work with adults. I wanted to go through all of the different kind of aspects of the, you know, or different pillars of the pathway. So I'd done the children's pathway first, got my children's licence, and then the same with the youth pathway, and then the adult. And the theory behind that is quite simple. You get to work with players at different ages and stages of their development, you know, whether it's grassroots, recreational, development, then elite, and, you know, eventually professional. So it was a conscious effort on my part to start off early.
Do you think that's maybe a problem nowadays, that maybe in particular ex-pros, they think obviously they've got the background behind them themselves, but maybe skip those pillars, like you say, the grassroots, the recreational, and go right in at the top level?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you look at, firstly, the average tenure of a football manager now is less than a year. It's incredible. It doesn't happen in any other business. So it's tough. And, you know, you go through coach education, and it's how you separate yourself from, because the market's saturated with a lot of good coaches. So you could have a pro licence, someone else have the pro licence. How do you set yourself apart? It's your experience and your personality. So I've always felt that it's been good for me to work in a factory for 17 years, eventually, you know, gaining management techniques and skills within a different environment. I've worked in different businesses, different organisations, but often now, you know, what happens in football management is there's a lot of ex-players, and, you know, there is a lot of transferable skills, but you don't have that other experience which can help you when you go into football management, because it's a complex business now. It really is, being a football manager.
Just as you touched on there, obviously working in a factory for 17 years, how much does that contribute, like you say, transferable skills in that aspect? Like, obviously so many women have to maintain a separate career while they're keeping up with their football. Can you try and integrate the two simultaneously?
No, it's too tough. I think now the pathway is much better. So if you're a young girl, you can have a clear vision in terms of, you know, if I do well at football, I can get a professional contract. So you don't need to think about working. Whereas if you want to go into coaching and managing, it's still managing people. So I think getting experience in different environments is really critical. And I never recognised that at the time when I worked in the factory, because I started off as a production operator straight out of school, and eventually worked my way up, you know, a supervisor, then a section manager, responsible for like 3 high volume production lines, which was tough. So every day, and that was results. So you were in control and responsible and accountable for, you know, the daily production figures. So it's quite similar in a lot of ways. And it was a Japanese company that I worked with, and, you know, the two things that they were really, their values, they were always organised, disciplined, and efficient and effective. And I think when you look at that, that's what you need to have in any environment to be successful. So I learned a lot, and, you know, I worked with a lot of good people. It was a predominantly young workforce, so, you know, that in itself was quite challenging, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fantastic. You know, you had to think on the spot. You have 90 employees, and you're standing there on a Monday morning, and maybe there's 10 people off sick. How do you get the same results when, you know, your team, you don't have a full complement? So the decision making had to be fast and on your feet. And I really do think, looking back, my time in the factory, it was Mitsubishi Electric, it gave me so many skills that I kind of use now in terms of kind of my management role. Well, not now because I'm not working right now, but
the next one.
For the next one.
So as you said, obviously that was all happening while you were still playing. So how does that for Scotland cap come around?
The first one came around, I was playing, I was doing quite well, and I was still pretty young at the time, I think 18, 19, and I got a letter to say that I'd been selected in the squad, and I came on against England as a second half sub. I think it was the last 15 minutes I got, and we lost 3-0, and it was at Starks Park, Raith Rovers, so I remember it really well. Had to pay 50 quid to play for the national team. We had to, we stayed in a hotel, and there wasn't as much resource, and went into the women's game back then. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do now, but back then, so I actually paid to play for the national team, my first cap. £50, well worth it though.
I was just going to say, it was well worth it.
Definitely.
How many more did you have then before you took that period?
I got one.
Just
so
one?
I got one cap, and there wasn't a lot of international games then, that's for sure, but I got one cap, and one reason or another, other things come along, and then I took a long break for football, and then went back and got my 58 caps from 2001 to 2008.
So you get those 58 caps. Where are you playing your trade at that point?
I was at a club called Giuliano's, which actually not far from here. We're based here, Dalkeith, so it was like a kind of an affiliation with Hearts. Hearts, it was Hearts Ladies at the time, and I played, a couple of seasons there, and then I eventually moved to Kilmarnock, who were quite a successful team then. From Kilmarnock, I moved down to Doncaster Bells, who were famous team down in England, one of the best teams at that point, and then I came back up to Scotland and played with Hibs and then Spartans, and that was it.
When you went down to Doncaster Bells, did you see a difference in the quality between the Scottish women at that point and then in the English league?
Yeah, I mean, it was very competitive. You had big stars, Casey Stoney, Katie Chapman was playing at the time, Julie Fleeton was down there at Arsenal, you had Leanne Sanderson, you had big names, Jane Ludlow. There's a whole host of stars, and it was, back then, it was the best players in the UK that played, in the league down in England, so it was brilliant. I thought at that time I maybe wouldn't have got the chance to go down to England and play, but when the chance came along, I took it because I thought it would help me at my time in my career, and I was right. It was the right decision for me at the right time, and I loved it. I think the biggest difference was the physical side of the game. In Scotland you maybe had a handful of players that were really physical, and but down in England everyone had that wee bit dig about them, and it was a really competitive league as well. It was that competitive environment, and all good players want to play at the highest level, and I felt that it helped me at that time in my career develop even further, so it was great.
As well as the period out and then obviously going down south, when you came back up to Hibs and to Spartans, over, not so much obviously this season, but over the last few years they have been the front runners as well as Glasgow Celtic, especially in the Scottish game. Did you see an improvement when you came back up?
Yeah, I think it's England, it's similar to the men's game. If you look at Scotland right now, and the best players that play in the Scottish Premiership, they will go on and play, they want to go down to England and play into, the English Premier League. And it's no different from the women's game. The best players will migrate because they want to challenge themselves in the best environment. The good thing about Scotland now, if you talk about here and now, is that there's a lot of there's more professional players, which is a good thing for Scotland, and they're able to attract, if you look at Glasgow City, for example, they've got players from all over, Rangers are doing the same, Celtic as well, so there's more investment in the game now. In my time, when I was down in England and came back up, you always miss that competitive environment, because there's always just one or two teams, up in Scotland that are challenging, and that needs to develop further because, in turn, it has a knock-on effect. It helps the clubs, it helps the league, and in turn, it helps the national team.
So obviously, it transpired at 3 clubs, Kilmarnock, Hibs and at Spartans, that you were player-coach. Is that something that you really wanted to do?
I wouldn't recommend it. It's one of these ones where each of the clubs, I was the oldest player, the most senior player, the manager leaves, and then you go in as an interim. But it was never something that I wanted to do long term. It fitted in okay because I was always conscious that, I'm going to be a coach. I want to be a coach. I was going through, I think maybe at the time, B licence, A licence. So it was okay. But to do it properly, coaching, you're embroiled by it, and you embrace it so much because you want to do well and you want to help the team. So you need to plan, you need to prepare. So to do both is hard, especially if you are playing still at a top level. It's impossible. And you only need to look at football in general. There's not many people do it. But I found myself at Spartans was a wee bit different because I'd already in my head, I was retiring from international football. So that one was okay, but the other two was a nightmare. It's impossible.
Does it contribute a little bit more than to the decision to retire?
No, I think I'm quite proud that I decided to retire at the right time, because there's a lot of players get it wrong, and I always felt that I wanted it to be on my watch, not on someone else's. So, we were for the national team, and then the national team, in my opinion, is always a pinnacle. It was for me. So we were playing in a qualification campaign, and we got to the playoffs with Russia. So I'd always decided, regardless if we qualified or not, that was the right time. I was 39. It was getting tough on the body and trying to catch young players that were, half my age. So I knew it was the right time, and I said that for myself and the team that, I would finish the last game, and regardless, because it was, for the younger players coming through, it was important that they got an opportunity as well. And so I was always clear in my head that I knew when I was going to retire. I was just, I was sometimes getting injections, and injuries to go and play, and it takes its toll on your body. Operations on the knee, and just like everyone, the ankles like glass and whatever else. So no, I was happy, and my decision was at the right time, the right thing for me.
Can you look back on your playing career fondly?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it every single minute. For the little girl, doing keepy-uppies when I was getting sent to the shops for my mum, to playing for my primary team. I still remember running out in pitches, and playing in cup finals for my primary team when I was a 10-year-old. That for me was everything. I used to cry at night if it was raining and the game was off. That was terrible. My parents still talk about it yet. So for that time, that was as special for me in that era, because not a lot of girls played, to then going on and represent my country and doing so much in the game. And I wanted to win every single time I went out, even if it was playing with my next door neighbour, and we're playing penalty kicks or whatever the case was, World Cup or whatever the game was I wanted to win all the time. Yeah. And that was installed in me from an early age.
Before we get on to your extremely successful managerial career, I just want to touch upon the work you've done with SFA. I want to get this right. Was it the Technical and Development Programme Leader?
That's some title.
Girls and women in football.
Very good. That's impressive. My business cards were like that size with that title. Yeah, it was. My work there was really good. It was really, the title, it was really about the pathway for youth performance players. Yeah. So it was about enhancing that and devising a curriculum, and we had regional squads, the 6 regions in Scotland. So I managed that programme and worked with all the coaches, and I absolutely loved my time. So I think it's 3 occasions I worked with the Scottish FA. So, but it was great. I loved it, and at that time I was combining the role with under-19s as well.
So you giving back then?
Absolutely. often people think, and they look at football managers now or football coaches, and they think, oh, it's, paid position. That was one of my first paid positions as a coach. Everything else I done was a volunteer. And, message to all the coaches or young kind of aspiring coaches, go and volunteer, because, it helps you so much gain that experience. So that was probably one of my first paid, coaching roles, and, great experience.
Touched upon the obviously the under-19s as well, and you took them to the World Championships. Is that when you started to realise that there was progression, and the Scottish women, they were going somewhere? Yeah,
I mean, we got to the Euro finals, I think it was 2009, 2010, over in Macedonia. And we had a really special group of players at that time, some who are playing in the national team now. But that said, I think we had a tough group again, Italy, Germany and England. And big learning experience for myself, for the players, because that's the very top players at that age level. And it was such a fantastic experience. It really was. Some big household names that I've went on to. And it's funny, when you're a youth team coach, you look at all the players in particular year groups, and I follow their careers to see where they're at now. And it's amazing, some of the success stories from that era.
Obviously the work you've done there and everything, and promoting and pushing the women's game, that ultimately obviously led to Arsenal. How did that all come around?
It's basically, I was really happy in my role, and I got a call. I was doing my pro licence. I just finished my pro licence, and I got a call just out the blue, saying, we're looking for a manager. Would you be interested? Would you come down and show you around the place? And I did. I flew down to London, get picked up, and it was an easy decision. I didn't even have to think about it, and it wasn't for money or anything like that, because I actually left the job and it was the same money, and so it wasn't a financial gain, but it was experience. It was experience of working with a group of players that had achieved a lot, but it was a kind of transitional moment for the club, because they had been the dominant team, but other teams and clubs were investing heavily, and I felt that's what I needed. I needed to work with an experienced group of players. I'd work with youth players. I'd work with senior players as well in the men's game. But, I really felt, and it's going back to the point I made earlier, that it's about, getting a skill set and working with different people, different organisations. I've worked with national governing bodies, local authorities, and now a club, and it was just another amazing experience.
What was the jump in facilities like?
It was really, really good, albeit at the time I went down, Arsenal women's team were only training twice a week. Okay. So they were still semi-professional at that point. It's only in the last, I would say 6-7 years that, down south, the WSL has really invested heavily on all the teams being, full-time professional. So we used at times the training facility that the men's team, but not all the time. But now it's different. They've got their own building, sitting, at London Colney at the training ground. So the facilities were different, they were better, but still nowhere near what they're at now.
Obviously, you said there that despite even being the dominant team for so long, the women there still were semi-pro. What was the support like then? Obviously, you win FA Cups when you're at Arsenal. You see it now, the sport is evidently growing, and you look at Man City as well, it's quite similar. But what was it like even then?
I think it was still in its infancy. It was better than Scotland by a country mile in terms of the investment and the support. But still, if you compare it to what's going on in the WSL now, it's like night and day. The contrast is amazing. As I say, the investment financially, human resource and financial resource now is incredible, the difference. But I look back really fondly my time there, not just because it's the success, and we played semi-final of Champions League and back-to-back FA Cups, a Conti Cup, but actually, putting plans in place for the future to say, Man City are coming into this league, we need to do more, and we need to develop the youth side of the game, and we need more investment, we need our own, training pitch, we need X, Y, and Z. So it's something that I've always, maybe it's a strength, but it's also a weakness, because, you know, I often find in the women's side of the game, you do dual roles. And that can be hard because your focus is not solely on the one thing. So yeah, in my previous roles, even when I was a national team coach with Scotland, it was a dual role. Arsenal, it was a dual role. Before that, you know, all the clubs have been, it's a dual role. So, and I think that's something that needs to change in women's football, because often, you know, it's about trying to maximise as much as you can out of that individual. And sometimes, you know, you become less efficient in what you do.
So the pride is still continuing now because you're seeing, like, say, your plans coming up?
Absolutely. I look back and if you feel, people might not agree with you, they might have a different opinion, but if you look back and you think, I've played a small part in that, and I look at my journey, you know, I'm 52 this year, and I don't hide that fact, but I look back at my journey and I think, people before me, women before me, paved the way for me to go and play. And hopefully I've done the same. People might not look at me and think that I've done that, but even the success of the national team, the players, the staff, you know, the organiser, everyone's played a part in putting Scottish women's football on the map. So that is a huge thing. And when I look back sometimes and I reflect, and I think of that wee girl, you know, fighting for everything, fighting to play in my local community, fighting to play at the school. That's what it's all been. It's been worth it. Every single minute of, you know, hardship or the hurdles, the barriers that are in your way, it's been well worth it.
There's a plethora of household names at Arsenal, and I don't really want to single anyone out, but just purely because, as we're saying, like advancements, and you're talking about media as well, how impressed are you to see Alex Scott doing what she's doing?
Do you know, Alex is a very, very humble human being. She's one of the best players that I've ever worked with, not just because of her footballing talent, but because of how she was as a person. Her attitude was just first class. And I think in her era, you know, she obviously had so much success with England, also Arsenal, playing at Boston as well, over in the States. But she was very, very focused on what she was going to do after football. When I was at Arsenal, she was doing a media degree, and I'm sure it was a Wednesday, her and Emma Byrne, the goalkeeper, they were always late for training because, or not always, but they were late for training sometimes because they would get stuck in traffic, but they were away having that conscious effort of thinking what's next. And, you know, I had total admiration for her. She knew, you know, I'm not going to play forever, and nothing was ever about money with Alex. She was very much about embracing the football, loved playing for Arsenal, loved representing her country, but just such a humble human being. I can't speak highly enough. So when I look at her now, it's no surprise that she's been successful because she's worked hard for it. She's earned it. And, you know, people talk about reputation. It's hard work with Alex, and she deserves every accolade that comes her way.
Fantastic. And then you touched on earlier that the market in yours is saturated with good coaches and great coaches. Do you think that's partly what played your part in wanting to go and get a degree at Stirling, that you felt that you needed to have that extra dimension? Obviously, you had the career behind you, you had all the UEFA licenses, then that degree as well, and that extra dimension. Yeah,
it was something that I felt had eluded me. I left school with no qualifications, went right into work in the factory, and whilst the practical experience was absolutely amazing, that's priceless, it really was, and it was so valuable for me as an individual, but I felt there was always something missing. You know, when you're a manager, coaching's different from management, but when you go into if you work with a club or a national governing body or whoever it is, when you manage, you have to manage different types of people. You manage up. We always talk about managing up, managing down. So you've got chairman, you've got chief executives. But you have to have an understanding of the broader aspects of sport and business. And that's probably what a lot of people don't get, because even although you're coaching on the pitch, there's a part heavily weighted in your job that's managing. So I'd always wanted to go and study academically. It just wasn't possible when I was younger. So I thought, maximise the use of my time, and I applied to go to Stirling Uni and to do a master's degree in sports management. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to do performance coaching because I went through my pro licence. So I felt that trying to correlate and align practical elements of sport to the theoretical side would really, really help me. And the modules that were, sport finance, principles of sports management, research methods, which are all massive in sport. Even when you talk about football, if you want to devise a blueprint for football and the way you want to play, you have to research, because you have to look at global trends, dissect the information, what are the best, you have to benchmark. So all these things are so important, even if you're a coach. So I felt that, maximise my time, go and educate myself. And it was daunting, I have to say, because I'd never done an undergrad. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Stirling Uni. I learned lots. My peers in the lectures were brilliant, because they all coming from an undergrad, I'm coming from a practical aspect. And I think that the kind of the mix in the classrooms and the debates and the discussions were fantastic. So I learnt heaps. It was brilliant. I didn't just do it to say I've got a master's degree. I'd done it because I wanted to educate myself and better myself. And when I talk to people now, and I speak about my performance journey. You get your professional journey, which there's loads of ups and downs, and it's the same in your performance journey. You have to, you've got to take the good, the bad, the indifferent, the challenges that come your way, and you're always learning. There's nobody on this earth that's a finished article, and that's the way I see myself. It's every day you have to learn. You have to be open to learn.
So obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, obviously you were doing this while coaching and managing the Lowland League side here, obviously, at Stirling Uni. So was that part of the deal, or did you go in just to study and then get offered the role?
Yeah.
How did that come around?
It was pretty much, I was offered a conditional place at uni, and then by chance I saw that there was the Lowland League team and British unis they took part in as well, that they were looking for a coach, and it was like a high performance manager. So they've got a brilliant programme at Stirling, a really good university for sport in general. But I thought the level of player that was coming into the programme, so they had a programme whereby the players would go and study academically, and they had players that had been on the periphery or been involved at professional clubs but had been released. So, it was about trying to get them back into the game, but also give them an opportunity to go and study academically. So I thought, that's a brilliant idea. So I applied for the job, got an interview, which I was delighted at, because I always think that if you get an interview, you've got a chance. Because you get in a room with people, you can, express yourself, you can, go through your journey and talk about what you can bring to the programme. So, I was successful in the interview and got offered the job, and I loved my time at Stirling Uni. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had. I have to be honest, because you were surrounded by other sporting disciplines. There were scholar tennis players, golf, swimming, you name it. It was just fantastic. So you learnt off the other sports as well, and I had an amazing time there.
How was the relationship? As you say, at the end of the day, these are student boys, they're younger boys, and you were coming in.
I try to say they go out all the time.
Well, perhaps we know a few of them. How did you find that? Because that's different to anything else you've really done then before.
Yeah, I felt that a lot of them were just needing a bit of confidence, because their confidence had been dented, maybe dreams of being a professional player, some of them being at clubs when they were 11, 12 years old, and then getting the news that they're being released. But actually showing a bit of maturity and intelligence to think, okay, what's next? Because football is a short career. Why don't I go down this route? So there was a lot of empathy on my part for them. But also I felt that it was a new challenge, for them as individuals coming to university. Some of them, a lot of the players were from down south and Wales, and from, we had international students as well. So we're moving away from home as well. So you were a bit of everything to them. You were the coach, the manager, the shoulder to lean on at times. And I think the biggest thing that helped me was, I mentioned the word empathy, but your soft skills are needed as well. But I think because I was doing similar, so I was studying, so I could understand at times of the year they were really stressed. And I was the same, because you're going into exams, you've got a dissertation to produce, and in the meantime, we're asking them to train at 7:30 in the morning before going to their academic classes. We're asking them to come in at night and do a strength and conditioning session. We're travelling down to Loughborough on a Wednesday to play, and then we're maybe travelling to, Gala at the weekend to play in the Lowland League. So planning was key for the guys, but also understanding when to switch off as well, and certain windows in that academic cycle that get really, really challenging for them. But I have to say, some fantastic human beings. And it was brilliant. The most pleasing thing about that programme, of course, we done really well as a team. We were really challenging. I think we finished third in the league, fourth, and we were really up there, and obviously got to the final of British universities, won the Queen's Park Shield, which is a historical competition for uni football. But the most pleasing thing was at the end of their 4 years, or some of them stayed on longer to do a master's, and watch them graduate. And that is something really special. Watching them develop as a footballer is one thing, but watching them develop academically, amazing.
When you first got the role, what was the media attention like? Obviously, being the first woman to coach and manage any sort of men's team at that level.
It was a circus. I use the word circus. It was incredible. I couldn't understand it, because I couldn't understand the hype. I knew there would be, but I couldn't understand it. I couldn't get to grips with it, because, all I was a coach that was qualified to do a job. I just happened to be female, and it was a big story. I remember at the time the university was an exclusive on the thing. It was the BBC. There was, media people from Iceland, Israel, Spain, you name it, contacting the university about, me being a female and coaching the team, and it was just. So it was, the cameras, all lenses were on, and in the meantime, all I was thinking about was I need to make a success of this, because if I don't, then it's going to hinder women in the future, because people will say, I told you it wouldn't work. So,
did you feel that added pressure?
Always. Every coaching licence I've went on, every single thing I've done, there's always pressure. There's added pressure on you being a female. Now, whether that's me in my head, or it's a subconscious thing, I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly something that I've always felt, that I need to do well. I need to do better than the other people that are on the course, because I'm a woman. And it's not a sexist comment, that's just how I felt. It's and I think that going back to the job at Stirling, the good thing was I had really supportive line manager and boss at the university, who, the university is all about developing people, Shelley, and you're no different. You're coming in here because you've got the skill set, and we're going to support you. And that, I got that message the first day that I walked into Stirling, and it's always stuck with me. Somebody hires you, you got to support them. You got to support the person that you hire, and it was great to hear that, because I felt less pressure. But you put pressure on yourself. I said it before, I'm a winner. I'm going to play golf later on, and I want to try and beat my score. That's what I do. It's what gets me up in the morning. But all that was in the back of my mind was, we need to win games. And thankfully, we got off to a reasonable start. We got a draw against a team that were sitting second in the league. I think it was Dalbeattie Star at the time, who were a good team. And, we went on a little run, and, eventually we started to kind of mould the programme, and you could see, fruits of the labour. So it was really, really good. But in my head, it was always a case of, you need to do well here.
To put it bluntly, as can be, what's easier, managing men or women?
In my opinion, I've said it, coaching and managing is two different techniques. It's different skills completely. In my opinion, managing men, there's still challenges. There's challenges with managing any group of people, regardless of gender, regardless of age. cultures, backgrounds. It's always difficult, but in my experience, it's I think less challenging working with men. And I think the only way I can explain it is that I think that there's more emotions, I think, in females. You know, the brain works different. And in my experience, when you make decisions, and let's be honest, the manager's the key decision maker, in the women's game, it has more effect on others. So it's not just an individual, it affects, and it has that kind of ripple effect. And that in turn can affect dynamics. Whereas in the men's side of the game, less emotions involved, and it's more, you know, about that individual. I'm just caring about myself, not about others. And I don't mean to sound, you know, in any way, shape or form disrespectful to both genders here. That's just my experience. And whereas coaching-wise, women are more receptive to coaching.
Right.
They want to know why they're doing something, when they're doing it, and it's a million questions. Whereas men, they just make it happen and they just go with the flow. Yeah. You know, don't get me wrong, they still ask questions, but it's different. Coaching, managing is different.
So then you make that move, go back into women's management. You can't turn down the national side,
No.
can you?
No, not at all. It's, you know, I said it time and time again, I was happy in my role. There was a couple of opportunities I had to go back into the women's game, or in fact I got an offer to go into professional men's game at the time I was working at still in uni. And I chose not to do so. I was at a time where I was about to graduate, and I felt I'd spent so much time and investment in doing that, I wanted to complete it. But when the national team role came along, you know, it might never have came along again. So I had to go for it, and you know, it was an amazing 3.5, almost 4 years. Fantastic.
How daunting is it though? Because the tenure before was 12 years long, and you were a part of that.
Yeah.
That's a long time, and you know that yes, it's a transitional period and it's a time of change, but it's quite a scary move.
Do you know what? I didn't see that as a scary move for me. I just saw it as, you know, I knew all the inner workings. You know, Anna was my coach. She was a mentor. You know, she employed me in a role as technical and development program manager. I had a lot of time for Anna, so I knew the inner workings of the organisation, of the pathway, and you know, I felt that I could take it to the next level. I was tasked with putting a football blueprint in place, which I'd done, the dual role. So as much as you're responsible for the national team and obviously the youth national teams and performance pathway, yeah, it was a dream come true. And, you know, I felt that I had enough experience to do the role, no problem at all. And, you know, there's always going to be challenges in football and sport because there's so many variables that can happen. You can have the best plan, you can try and have this kind of strategy how you want to play. You're facing opponents that have got the same end goal, and that's what happens in football. And you know, there's so many varying factors that can happen, and that's the beauty of football. It's an emotional game, but I felt quite comfortable going into the role, if I'm being honest.
I have to talk about obviously that World Cup run and everything towards getting to the finals. When you first go in and it's that game against Belarus, do you think, what have I let myself in for, obviously after that first half? Because even I remember that.
No, I was really calm.
You were the only one.
I mean, we had a lot of challenges. Our luggage didn't arrive. We had to borrow training kit. It was the worst first trip. But if you start to focus on the negatives, it can filter and cascade throughout the team. And, you know, 12 years they've had, you know, the same coach. They've got a new coach. They find themselves 1-0 down. There's no luggage. You can go on and on and on. But things in life happen. That's what can happen in life. And you've got to be ready for things that don't go your way. And, you know, I remember at half-time, myself and my assistant coach, Andy Thompson, we just went in and said to the players, look, relax, you'll win the game. You know, we've created so many chances and your chance will come, and, you know, it might not be pretty, but the important thing is getting the win. And so we were very calm at half-time with the players, and, you know, we got the win and then come home, played Albania, won quite comfortably. So, but, you know, listen, that's what I was saying earlier. Things are always there to challenge you, and it's up to you to make sure that you stand up to the challenge.
Obviously, one of the aims going on was to make the World Cup, to make a major tournament. What do you think made it that this one was successful? What was the differences in the games? Like I always look back on the game against Poland. Like I think maybe that could have been a game that a few years prior probably wouldn't have won. There's little moments in those sort of games. Do you think that was the difference that made that a successful campaign?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things. Ultimately, you've got a group of good players. The squad, the depth of the squad is pretty good. It was a tough group. And I think that in years to come, people will eventually recognise that probably they overachieve. Because you hear it now as well, saying, talent and talent. Talent alone isn't enough. Yeah. You've got to have the mindset, the psyche in football, the psychological side of the game is huge, absolutely huge. And you've got to do it. You've got to make things happen. And I think that campaign, we had so many difficulties. We were going a goal down to Belarus at home and away. We're in Albania, and that last game, you're like looking at the last game and you're like got about 20 opportunities to score, and like then they score just before half time, and you're those things. But I never ever get fazed about anything like that, and I don't buy the Scotland hard luck story. I don't buy it. People talk about it all the time. Oh, we do it difficultly. It's nothing to do with luck. You've got to create chances yourself. You've got to get that end product. You've got to have the right mindset. You've got to be positive. But there was so many challenges, even in the first game at home against Poland, where they get a penalty and Lee saves the penalty. And I remember at half time again being really calm and saying, look, play on their left fullback. She'd already been booked. She eventually gets sent off. The game opens up, and these are the things that, small marginals that can make a difference. And it could easily have went the other way. That's the big thing in football. You Poland away, I can remember sitting down, because we go 2-0 down. And I remember sitting and my assistant, Andy Thompson, in my uni saying, I have not got a clue how we are losing this game. This is unbelievable. And we're having a chat in game. We could not believe how we were losing the game. And it's just, that can happen. You can have chances, you can dominate the ball, possession, but you have to have an end product. And we got caught out, twice in the game. But eventually, I always felt that if we'd got one goal back, because it's amazing, football, how momentum shifts. And we've been in that position as well. You talk about the Argentina game, it's the same thing. And we've been in that position as well. And you see it happen all across the globe in football. But the campaign itself was the defining one for me. Everyone talks about the Poland away game being but Switzerland at home for me was a big one, because, and everyone talks about it now saying away from home we were too negative. That's people's opinion. But you're playing against a good team. You've got to recognise the quality of opponents that you're playing. And at home, everyone's talking about we had to win by 2 clear goals. And I remember speaking to the players the night before and going through some analysis. This is how we're going to play. And I posed a question to them. You should judge yourself now on playing a team that's higher ranked, because that's when it counts. That's what you're judged on. Forget about end result. This is what you should judge yourself, how far you've come. Can you do it when it matters against a higher ranked opposition? And to be fair, the players were well up for it. We pressed. We had to win. It's as simple as that. The dynamics in a game can change depending on what outcome that you're needing. So, people talk about the World Cup in England. We played better in the second half against both England. That's because we were losing 2-0. It's no rocket science that you can actually play without pressure. But the campaign itself was amazing. And I was probably the only one that felt that we could qualify. Because even, when we didn't win by the 2 clear goals, because I knew, Switzerland had to play us at home, our home game, and they had to play Poland, in Poland. And they are going to struggle, back-to-back games. And they celebrated, the game when we played them at home because you know, we didn't get the 2 clear goals, they celebrated. They lost the game, but celebrated. And I said to our players, because our players were devastated after it, they didn't win it. I said, don't worry about this. You know, we go and win the next game. Don't care how we do it. We win the next game, and we'll see where it takes us. And because I always felt that they would struggle against Poland, and you know, it proved to be the case. And it was such a brilliant. The game itself was horrific. You know, that'll be in a game. You go through all the emotions in that game, but it was such a brilliant feeling. You know, eventually getting the news that the game had ended and you know we had qualified. It was brilliant.
Before the actual finals themselves, as you say, it's momentum and that's obviously carried through. I just want to touch on the Jamaica game just before. What was it like, obviously, you walking out with your girls and seeing that amount of crowd?
I think that for me is the biggest thing, that, you know, in terms of achievements, and to see 18,500 at Hampden, and I've mentioned it lots of times, but I think it was one of those surreal moments, you know, where I never got the opportunity to play at Hampden, and to be fair, the women's national team had only played there once before, so to go there, and you know, I requested it. I said, I want to play at Hampden. Let us play at Hampden before we go away. The Scottish FA made that happen, and the players were brilliant in terms of generating support, and you know, we were going all out. Donald Gillis, who was the head of girls and women's football at the time, done a magnificent job, as did a few others, to generate as much, you know, of a support. But it was just such an amazing feeling, you know, leading the team out, your national stadium. You think back to, you know, the wee kids, you know, kicking a ball, the wee girl, no any organised football to play, you know, girls football, had to play women's football, and you're leading the team out before their very first World Cup at Hampden National Stadium, and the place was absolutely, it was buzzing, you know, it was, the atmosphere was electric, it was just fantastic, it was so good, and you know, that was a moment that I think will live with me forever. It's fantastic.
Obviously as well, the World Cup finals themselves, how do you look back on it? Obviously we can dissect it and, you know, decisions left, right and centre, but how can you look back on it as a whole?
I think brilliant. It's amazing the amount of people that have, you know, basically now know that, you know, with the women's national team, they're household names, and they enjoyed, we did something special to allow people to watch Scotland play at a World Cup. You know, when was the last time that happened? For the women's team, never. You know, and it might be a long time before we do it again. You know, hopefully we do it again on a regular basis. You know, that's 2 finals, you know, Euros 2017 and then the World Cup in 2019. But I reflect back and think, wow, okay, we didn't get what we wanted out of the last game to go to the next stage, which no Scottish team, we were almost there. You could dissect it, like you say, till the cows come home. Should you have made a sub? Should you have done this? Because that's what everyone says. And hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
And all I would say is that, you know, every coach and manager, certainly coaches and managers that I know, you always have a rationale behind your decision making. And ultimately, you know, after we conceded the first goal, you could sense the momentum shift. Yeah. And it's a hard thing to explain, but you feel almost, this is going to be tough. Yeah. You know, you concede that first, you don't concede that first goal, and it's another 5 minutes later, it's a different story. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. That's sport, and you've got to be able to cope with that. You know, as the manager, I'm responsible, I'm accountable all the time for everything. So, you know, you look back, as a whole overall, 2-1 against England, one of the favourites to win it. 2-1 against Japan, previous winners, runners-up. People say we should have beat England, we should have beat Japan. And, you know, I have a wry smile because I know the capabilities of the team, and I think that if you think of the Euros, the heavy defeat, you know, against England, I think we certainly bridged the gap. And there's so many people have complimented the way that we played in the campaign at the World Cup. And of course, you know, everybody's lasting memory is the Argentina game where you're winning 3-0. And should we do enough to win? Of course we should. You know, I won't deny that, but it didn't work out. And as the manager, I have to take responsibility. It took me a long time to get over it, for sure. as, you know, the players, and it's something that, you know, you have to eventually decompress, you have to reflect, you have to think about, you know, what if this, what if that, could have done this, could have done that, but eventually you've got to put it in a box and move on to the future. And, you know, that's what I've done. It's taken me a long time, but I reflect back, and it's with immense pride that I look back and I reflect and taking the team to the first World Cup. It's amazing.
As you say, you've got to box it up and move on, and then obviously it's moving on to the next Euros campaign. It's a broad question, but what do you feel went wrong? It was a similar bunch of players.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much change.
I think that first and foremost, you know, you can't just keep on saying a talented group of players. You can't, because talking, you know, isn't enough. You've got to kind of action it. Yeah. I did think when the draw was made, now maybe people think that I'm overcautious.
Tough group.
It's a tough group. You've got the best, you know, second ranked team. You've got the best, probably the best third ranked team. Yeah. I knew it was going to be tough. If you look at Portugal's record, they don't score a lot of goals, but they don't concede a lot. So I knew it was going to be tough. Finland, previous manager, always renowned for having the teams robust. You know, Finland, really tough to play against. We've got a terrible record against Finland. Yeah. You know, if you look at it across the board, for years and years, we've got a terrible record against Finland. That said, we have good enough players, you know, to get results, and we were the pot. And I think pressure's a big thing. You go into the previous campaign as underdogs. We've always been underdogs in the groups up until, you know, the recent campaign. You know, you could talk about, you know, what didn't go well. We got off to a great start. Cyprus, Albania, clean sheets. You go to Pinatar in preparation. You win 3 games. You could go 6-7 games unbeaten. But when it comes to the crunch, you have to be able to do it against, you know, when you're under pressure. We created enough chances to win 10 games in international football. We couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, and the goals we conceded, you know. But again, as the manager, you're always accountable and got to take responsibility. And, you know, that's why now there needs to be a fresh approach. There needs to be a freshness for the national team. I always think that in international football, because you don't get it's not like in a club where you buy and sell players. You've got a group of players that, you know, are the mainstay. So it's important that there is a freshness, and that's why it's a good thing, you know, that, you know, there's going to be a new coach in place for the campaign. I'm devastated, you know, for the players, for the country, that, you know, we weren't successful, because, you know, we certainly have a group of players that are capable, but you've got to, it's like everything. You look at football across the world, if you could predict what's going to happen all the time, we'd all be millionaires.
Did you know if you weren't qualifying for the Euros that you would step down?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, when I came into the role, I specifically got a 4-year contract, 2 cycles. And obviously with COVID, you know, the Euros were getting extended. Yeah. So regardless, I wouldn't have been at the Euros. You know, if we qualified, I wouldn't have been there. Because I in my head, I wanted the 4 years, and, you know.
So you still wouldn't have went?
I still wouldn't have went, no.
Even
if we had qualified. I'd already made up my mind, 4 years, and, you know, the extension on to, you know, the finals. I wouldn't have been there. People probably say, you're kidding on. It was always in my head, 4-year contract, and I wouldn't have stayed for it. I'm quite ambitious, and I think that in a national team, I was always conscious the 2 cycles would be enough for me as an individual, and, you know, and for the team. The team, and I reiterate that, they need a fresh approach. You need a fresh approach to get the best out of, you know, that group of players. A fresh approach is needed.
I appreciate it's hard, obviously. You see, I haven't qualified for the Euros, but how proud are you of the group of players that you have left behind?
Yeah, I mean, they deserve the credit, because ultimately they're the ones, you know, most of them are all playing professional football now. And there's been you know, their families support them, previous clubs within the pathway. Our National Performance Academy helped a lot of the players, but, you know, that there's small things that you can make a difference with. And, you know, I think that, like I say, I've played a small part in some of their development, and, you know, at the end of the day, I look back and I reflect, and the World Cup, I think, was a game changer for girls and women's football in Scotland, and, you know, the players should take a lot of credit for it, because they, you know, generated the success on the pitch, and, you know, there's a whole host of people that's been responsible for that, and for me, I just look, I've played a little small part in it, so I'm happy.
As you touched on it at the top of the show, you have been able to go to some games. You've upped your media sort of work. How much have you enjoyed your punditry? And obviously, we see you on Sports Scene. How much are you enjoying that?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that I try to be impartial, because it's not easy, you know, all the time. Well, people think that you're not impartial, but I try to give an impartial viewpoint, and I try to be consistent with that. You know, I'm saying it's not easy being impartial. It is easy being impartial, but to be consistent with your views is challenging. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've got an opportunity to go and watch live football. I've got an opportunity to speak about it, and I've got an opportunity to be analytical about it. And these are all the things that I love doing. So it's been amazing. I've had some really good opportunities over the last few months, and as I say, I look at it in a different way. You know, some pundits are, you know, look at it from a different viewpoint. I look at it more analytical, you know, and I really enjoy it.
Is that the future, or are we getting back into management?
Who knows?
Women or men?
Do you know, football is football for me.
Yeah.
And I see it the same game played by different people. So I don't know where that next opportunity will be. I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing just now. I feel I've still got a lot to offer in various different capacities, you know, hence the kind of my performance journey, doing different things. Eventually, probably where my future lies is off the pitch. Eventually, maybe in a sporting director or a technical kind of role. But who knows? I mean, I don't know what the future holds right now, but I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing.
Can you see yourself managing professional men's football?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's all about opportunity and, you know, getting the right environment.
Shelley Kerr, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.